going, oh, I just wanted to really thank Anne Durandi. He's like, in fact, she was really the one who did everything for this conference. He's like, I mean, Mike and I, we were here, you know what I mean? But then, so then I'm like, that's almost even worse because, what it means is that they stuck Anne Durandi with all of the administrative work for the conference. But then why is Anne Durandi not introducing the conference? Why are you on the podium introducing the conference, right? Anne should be introducing Max Cooper, not you. And so he's basically like, I just wanted to really say that Anne did everything here. And so I was like, this is like terrible, right? But then, and then another guy then got up who, actually my postdoc was with me and he didn't know who he was. And he was really old and he was definitely, and he was talking so slow that my postdoc was like, who is this guy? I'm like, well, he's really famous. He discovered receptor editing, and I mean, like, he's considered one of the most amazing researchers in the field, but he was definitely like way past his time because he was talking like this, and everyone was like, this is gonna end painful, But anyway, he was showing a picture of the first Keystone B-Cell conference, and there was one woman and like all of these guys, like hundreds of guys around. So he spent like all the time focused on this guy over here. He said, this guy was amazing. He was my friend. This guy was amazing. He was my friend too. This guy was amazing. And then he circled the woman at the very end. He's like, you're probably wondering who this is. He's like, you're probably thinking she's somebody's secretary. And then
did we hear about this?
Yeah, we heard about this.
Told us about this.
I know.
That's terrible. Just like even like saying
mentioning
that.
that.
Like, you don't need to say that. It's like just introduce her.
Right, reinforcing, subconscious bias, right? And he's kind of like
attention to the general.
And I was like, are we really thinking she's somebody's secretary? Maybe you are, and then he basically just said, no, she was a researcher. But then he never, told us what she did. She never told us and then he moves on. I'm like going, oh my God, this is the most embarrassing like series of conferences I've ever been to. And then I was actually looking at all of the speaker lists and I realized that like the women, so in the clinical sessions, women made up about maybe 30 to 40% of the speakers, which is very common. But in like kind of the hard science sessions where it was like very basic science, like the women were literally like 10 and at most like 20% of the speakers, and in a lot of those sessions when they did have a talk, they didn't have the keynote, like they didn't have the big talk, but they had these sections for what they called mini talks, which were postdoctoral fellows that were presenting their work. And so a lot of times it was just like a woman postdoctoral fellow presenting her work, and so I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. But then I was sitting at breakfast and, everyone's going around the table introducing themselves and there was a senior guy there from the Karolinska Institute of Sweden, which is the institute that gives out the Nobel Prize. And so he was there and basically, so we were all going around and introducing himself and he gets to me, and this was the Keystone B-Cell meeting at Banff, so it's like a beautiful ski area and everything like that. And so he gets to me, he goes, and why are you here? Are you here to ski? And I'm thinking, he like preempted me from even introducing myself, and so, and I'm like, what do you say to that? I'm like, I'm a woman PI, NIH funded investigator, I mean, like it just sounds ridiculous, right? But you have to just be very calm. You're like, no, I'm a PI, I'm here with my lab, we're presenting in this session, Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and actually we had quite a bit of overlap, which he became interested in, and then he started asking questions, I think it's probably,
it's like the first thought that popped into his head. It's like really bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, she can't be here for this.
Yes, and and like, he's like, oh well, then you must be familiar with our work on IgG4, blah blah blah. And I'm kind of like, it's
like having to prove yourself.
Right, and it's like the confidence issue, because like obviously he's 78 years old and he's from the Nobel Prize Institute, right? So I'm not going to be obnoxious to him. But I was thinking like I could have said the same thing to him. I'd be like, well, you should have been familiar with our work, that showed this and IgG4 and pemphigus. Are you aware of that? Like it's kind of the same obnoxiousness if you think about it. So so there was that, and then at one of the evening sessions, I was actually meeting with one of our collaborators who I'd never met before, and he's also European. And I do have a sense that there's a little bit more of a bias towards us in European men, but you know, so he found out that I ran a lab and that I also saw patients. And he's like, do you have kids? And I'm like, okay, and again, in front of everyone, right? And
Like, how is that relevant?
yeah, and if you think about it, like, you know, how do you answer that? So either the answer is no, right? And then, and who knows why? Maybe I couldn't have kids. Maybe, you know, and
Yeah.
and
Didn't want
then he, right, and then he'll cast judgment on you, right? But I answered yes, you know, and then he's like, oh, you're one of those. You do it all.
One of those.
Yeah, and so then I'm like,
Supposed to mean.
okay, and then that casts judgment as well,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm like, would he have asked, you know, first of all, how in the world is that relevant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, again, it's just this whole series of inappropriate comments again, you know, so I think, and, you know, it's kind of funny because what I've also noticed is that men will frequently comment on what women are wearing. You
Like
know.
on the news, men can wear like the same suit every day or whatever, but women always have to wear a different outfit or else they get called out.
I know. Well, it's really funny too because my sister, you know, she lives in Philadelphia, and like, you know, whenever I'm going to these conferences or whatever, she kind of like laughs at me because she says my style is the Korean grandmother style. And I'm like, but you don't understand. I'm like, because I work with, you know, 60 to 80-year-old men. Like, that's basically who I work with. And if you wear anything that has the slightest hint of chest, you know, shoulder or knee, I'm like, you will get commented on. It's like, that's all that they will remember. Like, they will not remember anything else. So like, you basically have to look nondescript almost for them to like take you seriously and focus on your science rather than what you look like, you know, which is completely crazy, but it's actually something that we talk about, like with the, you know, with the students that are coming in on the wards, you know, for clinics and stuff like that, because the fashions right now are very different, right? I mean, it's actually really hard to find a below the knee skirt, right? Right now, yeah, it's actually pretty hard. Like, you have to go into a place like Ann Taylor, you know, like, you know, some of these places and like try to purposely look for like something that's kind of at the knee or below, and it's kind of hard, but it's kind of a big thing because it's literally all that they will comment on. Yeah, so those are kind of like just a few examples off the top of my head that happened to me within the last month, you know, and they're definitely kind of going upwards because like everybody's happy and they love it when you're like a postdoc who's doing well and like, oh, good for you, you know what I mean? But then when you start to get promoted and then start to be considered for leadership positions, then they'll start to say, you know, like, oh, well, why is that? You know, what have you done? Like, are you really that good? You know, and they'll start to question you, so.
Is the interest there though? Like, how did you become interested in this? And do you think like enough women are interested in this topic?
Yes, I do. Okay. I mean, you know, so again, it's not 50%, you know, but it is 40% of the applicant pool. And, you know, when women don't go on, it's, you know, a lot of times it just relates to, you know, the biggest issue is just the natural inequity with childcare, right? Like, so obviously the guy cannot carry the child, like, you know, only you can, you know, only you can deal with like the post-pregnancy issues. And so, and that's definitely a hard time, like there's no question about it. And you know, and it's not just like when you have the child that it's done, you know, and the kind of the way, and this is where having like senior women faculty are a really big help. Like I remember one of the senior women said to me, she's like, you know, Amy, she's like, what you need to do is stay flexible, pick your battles, you know, and don't be perfect, you know. And she was saying that, like, you know, what may work for you now may not work for you in 5 years, it may not work for you in 15 years. So like, don't ever back yourself into a situation, you know, where you're like going at, you know, 130% all of the time, because you'll kill yourself, you know. And so, yeah, I've committed myself to the fact that my house will be a pit, like, you know, and I don't care, like, you know, I'm not gonna have like little like Easter bunnies and, you know, like decorations at every, you know, season necessarily or anything like that, but you know, I definitely, you know, just prioritize in terms of like what I do want to do. And I mean, I do feel like with kids that it's not just quality time, like quantity time matters too, like just physically being around, you know, matters. So yeah.
So like when you were like choosing your career, were there like any people that like looked down upon you for it and were like, oh, like you want to do that, like you're not?
No, actually, you know, I think you get a lot of, I always got a lot of encouragement, and so, you know, I'm trying to think, I guess it's also maybe what your natural response is. I mean, I think that they say...
You have to have thick skin. You know?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, I used to, like, if you get me, in one of my bad moods or cynical moods, I'll be like, all you need to succeed in this career is to be competent. Like, literally, you don't have to be outstanding. You just need to be competent, and you just need to be ultimately masochistic. That, like, whatever anyone says to you or, or does to you, you're just like, this is good, and then I'm gonna keep going, And, but the way I kind of, it's not that different in some ways, like, because, they say that when you get to college, if you don't get the class that you want, there's probably a way for you to get in there, but you just have to figure out how to do it. Go talk to the professor, don't take no for an answer, and all of those things just really carry forward, and I think that, for example, right now at the NIH, the funding rate is like less than 10%. So like there's less than a 10% chance that you'll get your grant. And it used to be much more towards 30%. So, the statistics right now are brutal. And so when they did the statistics and they looked at the numbers, women and men actually get funded at exactly the same rate. So, if they submit a grant application, the success rate is actually the same, but the difference is that men just keep applying. So like their rate of application is like twofold or more higher than the women. And so, and why that is, who knows? I mean, is it just a pure productivity issue? Is that the women kind of get the feedback and kind of give up? It's like no one...
Or are they like trying to make it like perfect before they...
Yeah.
It's like the recommendation thing, the raises thing, when you come in for raises.
Yeah.
Like men just ask for.
Yeah, and that actually affected me as well too, which I was surprised about because I thought I did a pretty good job. So because I'd heard a lot about that, and so when I initially got hired, I called all of my male friends. I'm like, if you feel comfortable, would you mind telling me your starting salary and like what you negotiated for? Because I just really want to understand like what is going rate basically. And I had all these conversations, and so I negotiated for a salary that I thought was like totally fair based on what my male peers were getting. But then once I got that, I never asked for a raise. So basically, and then subsequently, I ended up getting 3 grants. So that so we have what you call like percent salary support, like how much of your salary you're covering. And so I ended up getting 3 grants and had like 100% salary support basically, but I never bothered to ask for a raise because I was like, oh, I get paid really well, I'm very happy, And then a faculty member was hired in from California, so obviously California has a higher salary rate, but it was interesting because my chair came into me and he's like, Amy, I'm gonna have to give you a $25,000 raise this year. And I was like, why? And he was like, because I'm hiring somebody, and he's like, and I can't have him paid more than you because he's like, he would have been like 5 years junior. He only had 1 grant as opposed to 3 grants, and like the gulf was like massive. And he's like, so you have to make more than him. So I'm gonna have to give you a raise. So I'm thinking like, oh my God, because I was kind of like, I've probably been underpaid this whole time, but like it just never occurred to me, because I thought, okay, I'm gonna negotiate really hard and I'm not gonna ask again, and so I'm just gonna focus. I'm gonna work hard, it's kind of the classic thing, and then people will recognize if I'm doing well. It never occurred to me that when I got my 3rd grant that I should ask for a raise, but because it just seemed like weird, like I don't know, because so I mean. Yeah, and I think that these things happen all the time. So they say like the best chairs, will make sure that, when one person gets hired, that it's equally applied across the department rather than just kind of like selectively, giving the, the salary or whatever to the person that asks for it, because otherwise, you'll run into those problems.
Do you feel that the way that girls and boys are raised might have an effect on which like fields they're inclined to be interested in?
You mean by their parents?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, actually. I don't know if that would. I mean, obviously, if the parents are like telling them, like, "Oh, don't go into science. That's not your thing," then that would affect it. But I'm not like, especially in a place like Radnor. Like, that's a really
everything's perfect here.
Yeah, it's so savvy here, right? So I don't think so, but. There was this other study where they were looking at economics, where there's a big gulf, and I think what they did was they looked at introductory economics and what the grade was and how likely the person was to go on to